And then it happened one other time, and it's still so vivid in my head. And there was a meeting where there was some commentary made, and it was just I thought it was very inappropriate for an executive boardroom or for anybody to speak to anybody in that manner. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, that's it. I'm not going to go home and let this bother me. And I marched out of the meeting, walked right into this person's office. And I said, by the way, I said, just so you know, don't ever talk to me like that again. And I remember this person was sort of taken aback. They were like, what? What are you talking about? I said, what just happened in there? I said, I'm a peer, I'm a colleague. I expect to be treated with respect.
This week on the Courageous Podcast, we were joined by Lili Tomovich, who is the Chief Marketing Officer of Grove Collaborative, former CMO and CXO of MGM Resorts, and before that was a marketing leader at MasterCard. And great conversation today. Really interesting to just talk through her progression in her career, being a woman leader in Las Vegas in the gaming environment that has historically been male-driven, and shares with us a couple courageous moments of her own.
Yeah, she has seen some things in boardrooms, and I was grateful that she, was vulnerable and she shared. And I always love it, like when people like Lili come on the show. You're like, I could see myself working for her because she's considerate, she's thoughtful, but she still wants to win. And the other thing I really liked is just how she's a vertical hopper. So she's been in multiple verticals, and now she's in startup land, which we actually talked about, maybe where we get startups wrong as well in this episode.
Yeah, it's so important. We've heard the imposter syndrome thing, and the reality is, you have experience that's valuable, and she talked a lot about how important it is to build confidence. So learn a little bit from this one and enjoy the episode. So we're joined here today by Lili Tomovich, and Lili and I both worked in Vegas together. I would say we were friendly competitors. I was at Caesars. Lili was heading up marketing as the CMO and CXO, Chief Experience Officer at MGM, and as recently moved on to Grove Collaborative. And so we're excited to have you on today, Lili, and hear about the new venture and how that's going. And maybe you could just open, with the guest, just take us through your career. You were at MasterCard, went to MGM, running a big entity, a big brand, experience-based, and then kind of a pivot to startup world, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's been kind of a journey. So I started my career in financial services and then went to, mobile tech, and then was in loyalty and then MasterCard. And so I think part of my journey has been really this idea of trying new industries and new challenges. And certainly when I left MasterCard and I came to MGM, I remember, the number one question I got from people was, oh my gosh, that must have been such an interesting transition from you to go from financial services in New York to, casino, hospitality, entertainment in Vegas. And now moving on to a startup in the Bay, scale-up startup, I guess, in the Bay Area. So I guess I like new things. I get bored easily and I like challenges. And, but we can talk about it later. Actually, startups aren't as different. There's a little bit of mystique, I think, in Silicon Valley about how the rest of the world operates versus Silicon Valley. And I think, some of these perceptions or biases aren't necessarily true. One of them being, if you've come from a really big, global company, you don't understand the speed at which, these startups operate. And you and I know, Ryan, know this, like there is no big global company these days that doesn't move at the speed of lightning. I mean, they just don't. So I laugh and I think, what do you think the rest of us who aren't at a startup are sort of sitting around all day, so it's that piece of the transition's been pretty seamless because every company's moving super fast these days.
Yeah, I mean, I can attribute the busyness that happens in the gaming world to the startup world too. I've been working with startups and I'm curious, you went through kind of a big transformation at MGM while you were there.
Mhm.
And, how was that for you, taking a big company like that through digital transformation and also like a new brand campaign and, a dynamic changing environment in the market? I'm sure you learned a lot during that experience.
Yeah, it was really, it was, I just absolutely loved it. It was a lot of fun trying to figure out, as you know, from Caesars, our companies both were companies that grew out of, acquisition. And so when I joined, you find yourself with, this $2 billion food and beverage, business, 400 plus restaurants. And then you've got this big entertainment business and you've got T-Mobile Arena, and then you have casino and you have hotel. And somehow you need to sort of connect all of these in a more meaningful way for the brand, the business, and for consumers ultimately. And so I went about really repositioning the company, because when I joined, I remember our CEO at the time talking about us being a hotel and casino company. And he really, thought, why does Wall Street keep valuating us as a casino hotel company? What more can we do to really help tell our story? And I remember saying, well, leave that with me. And then we really worked through this repositioning, which is at the end of the day, who really are we and why do we exist? The good old brand question. And we realized we're an entertainment company at the heart of it, whether you're sitting by the pool playing blackjack or eating at, a Michelin-starred restaurant, it's all different forms of entertainment. And so then we really pivoted and ended up launching our first integrated campaign, which was all about entertainment. And our brand purpose became, MGM Resorts exist to entertain the human race. And, 6-7 years later, that positioning and work is still living on. So I'm happy about that.
So I think you're 7 months in at the new gig,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Nothing like starting a new job during a pandemic where you can't move and whatnot. I'm assuming you haven't moved, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
So how has that been? Like, how do you, when you lead a team, and you talk about humanity, I mean, what could be more important than getting on the same page with your teammates? How has that been?
Yeah, Ryan, it's such a great question. I've been talking to a lot of my peers about it. I mean, I'm not even going to sugarcoat. It is really hard to do this out of my, although beautiful, spare bedroom. I haven't met 99% of the folks that I work with. And so it's really hard. And especially for somebody like me who is really a people person, and I get a lot of energy being around my team and ideation and thought creation. And so you have to work just twice as hard. You spend a lot of time staring into the screen, and everything has to be so much more purposeful. You can't have that walk back to your office with a colleague saying, hey, can we talk about that for a minute? And you get that 5 minute of banter and relationship building. And, oh, I understood what you meant. Now everything is like, I got to make a call. I have to set up a Zoom. It's far more exhausting. And you worry about just those connections. And are you doing a good job sort of translating your vision and your strategy without actually being able to be there? So it's been tough, but I think I'm doing okay. But it's definitely a new skill and muscle to learn.
I miss those little collision moments. We used to call them do you have 5 minutes? And it never was 5 minutes. Like 2 hours would go by, but you'd have like a real idea out of it. I don't think we've cracked. I think we're still living in the land of transactional commentary. It's like it's on your calendar. You've got 30 minutes. What do you pull off in that 30? But which I have to imagine is quite hard because you're going into a new brand and you're trying to listen, but make your mark and steer the ship here. Big question for you. I mean, so you're at Grove, and I love what the brand stands for. I love what the story stands for. Although I'm interested to hear if you feel like the story is locked. I'm involved in a couple of DTC brands. I wish they would just say they're a brand, by the way. You see where I'm going with this question. Yeah. Have you been surprised by their understanding of story and brand? And the second part of this is, what is the balance on like performance marketing that you've seen there versus what I would call preference marketing?
Yeah. So it's a great question. So I think for Grove specifically, the story is quite powerful because it is CEO founder led, and Stu started the company, I think when he was 26, 27. And he really, when you talk to him, I love it. I just asked him the other day, I said, well, Stu, what's your why? Like, why did you start Grove? And he said, naively, I wanted to change the world. I want to change the world, right? And he was always focused from a very early age around sustainability and the impact of plastic on the environment, et cetera. And so that's really been part of the ethos of the company. And we're fortunate to have that. Your second question around performance. So all D2C brands are performance-driven machines, right? And that was part of the reason I joined, was to really help build a brand. Most D2C brands, I'm sure you've experienced this, they all sort of incubate on social media, right? So Facebook and Instagram, which is exactly where we grew the business quite significantly over the last 4 or 5 years. But then there becomes a pivot point where all of a sudden your CACs are too high through social media. You can't get the scale you need. And it's literally a playbook. I've seen it with Peloton and HelloFresh and Dollar Shave and Harry's. All of a sudden, which makes me smile, they all end up going to TV, right? To get scale, reach, and awareness. And as an established brand, you're kind of making the opposite pivot, which is less on TV, more on digital. With a D2C brand, so when I joined there, I was like, this is amazing. Like, we're trying to pivot to TV, where the last 2-3 jobs I've had, we're trying to pivot away from TV. So, but as a startup, streaming and linear are still incredibly important scale channels, as I said, to drive that awareness for these D2C brands. Yeah.
Lili, I was stalking you on LinkedIn a little bit and reading your opening description, which I love. And at the end, you have a little "I believe" statement, which I think is really awesome. And you've been behind technology, from what I know, in MGM and driving that. And you talk about it empowering human engagement, and that humans are really kind of the most important thing, and that's it, right? Like, you're a leader that really engages with the people around you. And so understand that it's probably, hard working through these digital mediums right now. But, one thing you say in there is that tomorrow is another opportunity to do better. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really interesting. I was, looking at Grove and their spots, and I think they actually have a spot called Do Better. So I'm just wondering, we talk a lot about, courage and aligning the personal you with the professional you. And part of that is really understanding values, your personal values, the business values, using those as filters to make decisions and be guiding principles at the end of the day. So how much does this hit home for you, and what Grove and the brand is established to do, and what they're trying to do, and what they believe in? Is that different from other brands that you've worked on?
Yeah, I mean, every brand, anywhere I've ever worked, each brand has been very sort of clear on their role in the world and with consumers, and that's always important. But what's unique about Grove is, as I said, the real mission and ethos of the company has always been to, leave the world a better place, right? And so to be able to work for a company that is a B Corp and is really focused on what can we do around sustainability and the environment and this huge plastic problem that we have in CPG. I mean, we really believe that CPG can be a force for good, right? For environmental health and public health. And so, billions of ounces of plastic end up in our oceans every year. And so what can Grove, this little company, which hopefully one day won't be so little, what can we do to eliminate, I'll use waste plastic as an example. And only 9, I learned a lot of stuff when I joined Grove, and I didn't realize that only 9% of all plastic is actually recycled. And so when you start thinking about that, you realize, where is it all going? Well, it's going into the oceans. And so for me, it's been really, as a marketer, really amazing actually to work for a brand that has a direct impact on the future of the world and our children. And so I loved the mission, purpose-driven aspect of Grove, and I feel fortunate to have been able to find a brand that aligns with some of my personal values as well.
I didn't know that. And I've been involved in organizations because I'm a surfer. So like plastic going into the ocean kind of, resonates with me a lot. And I love the spots. I love the message that they have. But, you came into an industry in gaming and Las Vegas that's, historically kind of stodgy, male driven, and could be challenging. And I mean, they've progressed a lot, I would say, over the last few years, both MGM and Caesars Entertainment with their initiatives. What did you take away from that? I'm sure, and I just know it from what I saw, in the brand that I worked for, the boardroom was made up of, older white gentlemen. So has that experience played into anything that you brought into Grove, and how important is that? I think, I've been watching a lot of the content that you push out on LinkedIn, and you're such a force for, empowerment and leadership and what that means. But, being a woman leader coming into an industry like that, was that challenging for you at all?
Yeah, it was really, there's a lot of things that I thought were so interesting to me joining the casino industry. And one of them, of course, is that it still sort of is male dominated, although of course, like Caesars, there was a big amount of energy around diversity, inclusion, and pushing for that at all levels through the organization, which I appreciated. But one thing, it did teach me, I have to say, is you have to just be really prepared to stand up for yourself, because you're in this environment that at times there's strong personalities. I'm sure you are familiar with the industry and the personalities. And as a woman, I think I found, women, or male or female, frankly, but you have to be able to sort of have conviction in your point of view and really stand your ground. And that's one thing I for sure learned while I was there. But I also appreciate, what I did appreciate working there is just, you don't see that kind of loyalty and tenure at a lot of other organizations. So there was such a richness of history with all of the folks that I worked with. And I actually really appreciated that. It was very often that I'd be speaking to another executive and they would say, I've been here 20, 25 plus years, which goes to show you there's something so powerful and addictive about that industry. I mean, it's, by far a super exciting, fun, energized place to work. And so the tenure of employees as well was super fascinating to me and special at the same time, because you don't realize the richness of history and information that you get when you have an opportunity to work in an organization where there is so much rich history that is shareable.
This may not be a fair question, so I'm going to just throw that out there right now. But, I love how you said you got to know when to stand up for yourself. Like, you've got your point of view on lockdown, and history can be a friend and history can be a foe, right? Like, where's the line between honoring legacy versus getting stuck in that? Like, so what do you take forward? Like, if you're going to give us advice for the listeners, where does history play really well into the future? And where is it like, you got to take a deep breath, honor what it was, but leave that part behind?
Well, I guess there's two aspects of it. One is just around leadership and culture, right? So there's a lot of inherited sort of operations DNA and the culture of a company based on that rich history. And then there's the rich history of the brand, and how do you sort of honor that, but continue the momentum and I guess keep it continuously reinvigorate the honor of the brand and the rich history that the brand has. And so it's always balancing the two. And as I said, the culture is really, that's the piece that's fascinating to me when you have old brands, as I said, with a ton of history and a lot of employee tenure. There's also a culture that comes there as well. And so it's how much do you want to mix in with the culture versus also bring in your own fresh perspective. And as I said, have the conviction and courage to stand up if you disagree with certain aspects of that culture.
It's funny you mentioned your CEO now, Stu, naively saying he wants to change the world, because the conversations that we've had at Courageous behind the scenes is similar. And you find yourself going, okay, this is audacious to say it this way. But I do think courage is a prerequisite for everything else that's meaningful. Like you got to start with, okay, this is the time to speak up and we're going to take action on this idea. And one of the ideas we keep coming back to is, okay, let's help companies or leaders face fear, understand fear, so they can create change and hopefully save humanity. And again, that's the audacious part. But like if we've learned anything about the last 2 years of politics, it's clear that it's going to be the businesses that have to stand up and make the change. And Grove seems perfectly positioned to do that. Does it make it just so much easier to wake up when you care about humanity and purpose actually matters and you're a B Corp?
For sure. I mean, culturally, it is, and I've worked at a lot of companies, it is by far the nicest place I've ever worked in terms of the people, the type of people, just the attitude, the positive energy, the willingness to help. I mean, it's really quite special. And I think part of that is the type of organization we are and the type of work we do. Just naturally, people, sorry, I'm getting a little message here. People naturally gravitate, it's self-selection, right? People want to work for a company that's doing good. And so that's been it's just a lovely, lovely group of human beings at Grove. It's special.
Lili, I want to pivot to basketball for a minute. So I think this is pretty close to your heart, right? You were on the board of directors.
A basketball pun? Did you just make a basketball pun?
Not really. But you were on the board of directors for Canada Basketball, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think you helped actually with the Las Vegas Aces. Is that correct?
Yes.
Could you share that experience a little bit? Because I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's really funny. So the viewers don't know this, but I'm 6'2", and so I played. Actually, I played a lot of volleyball, a lot of basketball, but I actually rowed in college. So people think I played basketball in college. I didn't. I rowed. Anyways, passionate about sports, and we had an opportunity. So it was actually the San Antonio Stars. Our CEO at the time was interested in starting to, obviously professional sports was a strategy of MGM's in order to fill up kind of the entertainment portfolio. And we knew the Knights were coming in. There was rumors at the time that the Raiders were coming. And so we decided that we wanted to see if we could start bringing in basketball, and we'd start with the WNBA to see if we could get enough sort of interest around that particular asset. And so we purchased the San Antonio Stars, and we relocated them to Las Vegas, and then went through the whole process of coming up with a brand and rebranding them, and obviously giving them a home at the arena at Mandalay Bay. And so that was a lot of fun. And of course, they just were most recently sold to the Raiders. So they're staying in Las Vegas, which is great news. But it was a lot of fun. The women on the team are just amazing community members, and they are great role models for so many girls here in Las Vegas, and frankly, in the US and around the world. And so getting a chance to work with the WNBA was certainly a highlight, and one of those things where you think, oh gosh, I didn't know that. You really realize that marketing skills are so transferable. And that's one thing I've learned every time I've jumped industries, and you always sort of go, oh, I'm a little nervous. Do I know what I'm doing? Whether it's basketball or hotel rooms or a credit card or hand soap, it's all the same kind of toolkit. So it's kind of fun to be able to use your toolkit on multiple different industries and products and services. Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, I just think that's so interesting because it's, it's like not part of the roles and responsibilities of the job you were doing, but like you helped bring and brand this and bring it to market, and really cool for the community there. You talked about nervousness and not knowing if, you have all the right skills to do the job, but really you get to a point where you realize you do. Right. And we've talked to other guests, and they talk about imposter syndrome when they go into new roles or they jump into a category and of course, you don't have all the institutional knowledge of a brand or a new category that others have that have been working there for a long time, but you are an expert in it as a marketer. And we define courage as knowledge plus faith plus action, right? And you need all three working together. And, hearing that definition, I'm wondering if there's a moment in your career where maybe things have felt a little uncomfortable, or, we talk about fears and being able to move through those fears, and having the appropriate knowledge and building that faith to get through there and then putting that into action. Have you experienced a couple moments that you could share with the audience where you felt you've taken a courageous stance, or you pushed through a courageous idea, or done something courageous in your professional career?
There is. And I would say, it's interesting when I think about courage, I kind of equate it to a couple things, right? Courage is curiosity, et cetera. But for me, courage really is about having the confidence to do something that you are a little fearful of doing. And there was, there's simple examples. And I'll be completely candid here for a moment, but at MGM Resorts, as I said, there was many powerful executives who were very poignant in their point of views. And I remember one particular, it happened a few times actually, where there was some behavior by a senior leadership person that I didn't particularly care for their behavior in a meeting. And I let it go a few times. And I'll tell you, don't ever let it go, because it started to eat me inside, because I started thinking, why did I not have the courage or the confidence to say, this is not okay. Do not talk to me like that, or do not talk to my team member like that, etc. And so I realized by not having the courage to do it, it was sort of eating me up inside, and it was really bothering me. And then it happened one other time, and it's still so vivid in my head. And there was a meeting where there was some commentary made, and it was just, I thought it was very inappropriate for an executive boardroom or for anybody to speak to anybody in that manner. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, that's it. I'm not going to go home and let this bother me. And I marched out of the meeting, walked right into this person's office. And I said, by the way, just so you know, don't ever talk to me like that again. And I remember this person was sort of taken aback. They were like, what? What are you talking about? I said, what just happened in there? I said, I'm a peer, I'm a colleague. I expect to be treated with respect. And that was not okay with me. And I have to tell you, it was so liberating to actually have that moment, as I said, of courage or confidence to do that. And I just, for everybody listening, it's like you just force yourself to do it. I promise you, you will feel so much better having done it than do what I did, which is let it go for a few times. And then you actually get more upset with yourself for not saying it. So there's so many examples of that. And I think especially in workplace environment where you have to have a voice and you have to use your voice for good. And hopefully that will make a difference, not only for you, but others to come.
I so appreciate you sharing that. Even like you said, if you let it sit there and fester, it's only going to make things worse for you down the line. But the unemotional part of that, which sounds odd to say it like that, is that you keep losing time.
Right.
So much to do. There's too much to do already. So what I'm learning just from our short time together is I'd chalk you up as a kind competitor. You got the Canadian part, you got the humanity part, but then clearly you're fierce. You want to win, and you have the basketball background. So it's interesting to see, when does the kind take the lead versus, well, look, this is a time where the competitor in you really has to come to the table. Make sure it's clear.
I think, Ryan, you just nailed it. There's something really hard about trying to, because you're right, I like to be, and I probably over rotate on the nice side, on the kind side. And it's hard to find that balance of how can you be a good person, a kind person, an empathetic person, but at the same time, know when, the line's been crossed and now it's your personal integrity that feels attacked and it's not okay anymore. And so I think finding that balance as a human is super important in all aspects of life.
You're also slightly dangerous because you started in money. And so I always find it fascinating when you have, because a lot of marketers, especially on the creative side, they don't understand the business side.
Right.
So how beneficial was that for your career to like start in that arena and like really get to understand how money works?
It's interesting because out of grad school, I sort of had the choice of doing your traditional, become a, classically trained marketer at Kraft or Procter and Gamble, which would have put me down I would have been a great brand marketer. But at the time, now I'm dating myself, but Citibank and American Express were doing this thing called direct marketing. Funny enough, here, like 25 plus years later, we still talk about CRM and direct marketing. But anyways, they were doing all that work around one-to-one CRM, direct marketing. And I kind of thought, I better go, dip my toe into that and see what's happening. Cause I can always learn the brand piece out of P&G or Kraft, but I want to know what's happening in this new kind of world of marketing with CRM. And so I did that. And the discipline, to answer your question, starting out in financial services, especially somewhere like Citi or American Express, which happened to be the two kind of big marketing machines back then, I really became classically trained in direct marketing and one-to-one relationship building, and the, I guess, vigor of being in a financial institution, and their early use of data and analytics was super beneficial to me early on in my career, for sure.
Lili, I want to go back to, you mentioned liberation, and we use that a lot with courage because we believe courage can set you free. And you're a wonderful leader. You've led massive teams. And I'm curious if you can share with the listeners just how you've helped teams get unstuck or liberate, and maybe you didn't even realize it, but the synthesis of courage in those moments. And what do you do as a leader? What do you think is important as a leader to, help your team also be liberated and find freedom?
Well, there is, first of all, as I said, I'm fiercely protective of my team and teach them to be protective of themselves and stand up for themselves. And I think that's super important. And I've had people work for me, say to me, thanks for teaching me to stand up for, for myself, et cetera. So that's super important. But two is, as a leader, I think to unlock yourself, it's this emotional intelligence and empathy that's super important. And the ability to put yourself in somebody else's shoes is super important to unlock your own personal growth and the growth of the business and those around you. And so I spend a lot of time, building one-to-one relationships, but also teaching people, if somebody says, well, so-and-so isn't performing, or I'm not sure, so-and-so has, I've had so many of these conversations where people would say to me, so-and-so's, mother, sister, father is sick. I'm not sure what to do. Should I put them on FMLA right away? And I'm always like, my first thing is timeout. Let's think about this. Think what this person is going through. Let's have conversations. The first thing we're not going to do is say, you must go on FMLA right away. Like we want to work through this situation, understand, how much time they may need away, what are they going through? And let's try and, put our arms around them and support them as much as possible. And I find some people come right into my office and they've got all the HR paperwork and they're like, so-and-so needs a leave of absence. I want to formalize this. And it's the last thing I do. It's like, I don't want to look at any HR paperwork. I want you to, lean in here. How can we support the person? And so building empathy for your teams, for consumers and the process is really important. I mean, I ask my team to sit down, once a month on, we all read social media, but we still have obviously an opportunity when customers call in live into our call center to listen into calls. So I force my team to do that once a month because you have to build empathy, as I said, for your peers, for your consumers, for the business, for the world at large. So I think that's a big unlock.
Are those the Grove Guides? Is that who you're talking about? Is that your customer service group?
You're so good. Yes, Grove Guides.
I'm on it. Well, I was like, I wonder if she branded that or if that was before her time. I mean, you've been there 6 months. Was that you or was it before
that was before my time. I cannot take credit for the Grove Guides, but I'm impressed that you knew that.
And well, it's cool to see like the focus. Again, it just comes back down to clarity and prioritization of like, what are we going to say is important? And even, look, I wonder what we need to untrain ourselves on. Like that HR person's doing their job. They were trained to do that moment, but like, how do you like shake somebody, short circuit somebody and get them thinking about the right thing and thinking about the empathy side? Or have they just been burned in the past and it's cost the company money and it's like fear,
Yeah. I just think the big, of course, the big trendy word right now is what's your superpower? And I think the ability to build relationships, to have empathy, to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, to be able to reach across the table and break bread, the ability to build bridges when they don't exist. I mean, God, the world needs more of that, let alone in business and in relationships. And so I think if people can build their superpower to be relationships and building bridges where they may not exist, that's going to be key for the future of leaders in successful, relationships and businesses.
We can't agree more. I think that's actually one of your New Year's resolutions, right, Ryan? Relationships. I
have, on my wall here, I've got 2 words. I've got relationships and discipline.
Yeah.
And I need to see those. For whatever reason, I need to see them every day. And relationships is as much about a relationship with myself as it is with Ryan or others that we work with. But then the consistency and being conscious of the discipline that's needed to do the job the way we want to do it. So I like that stuff. That's my cup of tea.
And what's interesting is I guess quarantine gives you a lot of time to think, but you also kind of realize as you get a bit older that there's some relationships in your life, either, past colleagues or you're like, you know what, I probably don't need to invest that much time in that relationship anymore, right? You realize there's something not right about this relationship. And I think that's super important too. I don't know if you have found that, but I've been thinking about that.
Totally. The power of saying no is so important, and
right?
Protecting your time. It's the only thing that really is a limited resource. We're getting close to time here, Lili. So, I want to close with just one piece of advice for women who are growing into leadership roles. You've been there. You've been in leadership role for 3 major brands now. If you could leave the audience with a piece of advice for women growing into these leadership roles, what's one thing that you could share?
I know I mentioned it before, but it's really about, having a voice, being courageous, being confident, and asking for what you want. And here's a person who I feel very fortunate to, be a chief marketing officer, but I can tell you, I did this without asking ever for it. And I kind of regret that, because when I was younger, I would see, peers, whether they were female or male. I try not to discriminate on men are better at women than this, but men do ask for raises, men do ask for promotions, and I'm not saying that women don't. So again, I try not to play that gender card, but I wish and it all worked out for me, and I'm thankful. But I tell the younger generation, don't be afraid to sit down and have that. And by the way, I see that in the company I work at now, which I'm thankful for, and I can see it in my teenage daughter, that they won't be afraid to say, hey, you know what? I really want to move into this department. I would really like a promotion. I'd like you to look at my compensation at year end or whenever the appropriate time is to have the conversation. Stand up for yourself, have a voice, be confident, be secure in who you are. And, the one thing my husband always says to me is the worst thing that can happen is a no. And that's it. It's a no. Life goes on. And so why are we so afraid of all of these things when the worst thing that can happen is your boss or whoever looks at you says, no, I'm sorry, not now. Okay, good. Well, at least I asked and I know where I stand and I can move on. And so it took me a long time in my personal and professional career to figure that out. And so hopefully this next generation coming up will be a little more fearless.
Wonderful advice. It's what we're here to help do is, really allow people to understand what courage is here to help you with. And we appreciate your time, Lili, and for sharing your story. So thank you for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was great talking to the R Squared team here.
Thanks for coming on.
All right, guys. Have a great day. Cheers.
Bye.
If you enjoyed the episode, please give us 5 stars, subscribe, and leave us a comment.
If you like what you just heard, sign up for your weekly dose of courage at returnoncourage.com.